Welcome to another Lumion live stream tutorial, guys. This is Chris Welton from CweltonDesign, and in this tutorial, we're going to cover everything about animating objects in Lumion, from the very basic to a little bit more advanced. So, in this tutorial, we're going to cover specifically how to animate a door, how to animate a crane, how to work with MassMove, how to do the most basic of moves in Lumion, how to do more advanced in Lumion, and I'll even touch on custom animation importing. So let's just go ahead and jump into our scene right now. Let's go into, we'll do into beach house. So, being an animation software, primarily, the ability to animate is extremely important. And we're not just talking about animations as in the rendering animation. I'm talking about moving objects. This can get really tricky. It can get kind of intermediately tricky, or it can be really, really basic. And I'm going to start the basics for you guys. For any of you just using Lumion, this is going to be geared towards you. You'll see how incredibly simple it is to jump into a Lumion project and just get some people walking, get some cars moving. So as we're opening this scene, we'll cut this part. All right. Alright, so here we have this scene open here, our beach house scene. Alright, so we want to animate a couple things here. Let's start with a car here. We're going to animate this car. Now to animate this car, we need to first set up, go into movie mode here. Just open Lumion up for the first time, give it a second. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start fresh. Go to new clip set here. And go to record. And we're just going to start simply having the camera do this. And I want to see the car go across. Let's make sure we have enough time. Let's give ourselves a couple seconds here. Let's just do like 10. It's a little sensitive there. That works. Okay, so we have an object here we can animate, and this is a Lumion car, which is important to understand. And we need to go into the tab here that says Scene and Animation. Now, there's a couple tools we're going to cover in here. First off, the easiest move of all is this move effect. So the move effect is in here, and we have this pencil, which means we're going to edit and determine what we want to animate. Now this one works as simply as start position, end position. Can't go wrong there. It's as simple as can be. And we have our basic move options here: move, up, down, rotate, scale. We also have pitch and bank. So this car, we're going to move it here, and I'm going to rotate it. Still on start position, so I want it to start here, and on end position, that'd look kind of weird if it ended there. I'm just going to have it rotate the same way we started, and go from here to there. And we play our animation. So what's important at being a Lumion object is the Lumion cars will automatically animate their wheels. If they're still, they stop. But when they're told to animate, they know to turn the wheels. If you were to import your own car, that's when you get some issues we'll talk about a little bit later. So that's that, pretty simply. Let's go ahead and do a person. So we have a couple types of people in here, different variations. Here's a man idle, and a man walk. We obviously want to use the walking ones. We do not want the standing man here to move. That won't look right. Let's just go ahead and grab this gentleman here. Oops, accidentally double clicked. So another thing you don't want to have, you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of your other Lumion friends. You don't want these people walking in place in your animation. It just doesn't, it's not what they're meant to do. These guys are meant to be given a path, or else they look weird just walking in place, unless that's what you do. Okay, so let's jump back into our same scene here. Let's get him out of the way of that car. Oh, that's not a good scene. Okay, let's move him out of the way. Again, simply, oops, that was the end position. And we'll have start position. He'll be walking the opposite direction. And there we go. Pretty basic. You guys can figure this out really quickly, I'm sure. Some people jumping in, it seems a little intimidating. Getting into animation, maybe having just worked with still rendering software. It's made very simply because of Lumion. Let's just do something a little fun here too, to play with some of these other things. Now, this is always kind of fun. We're going to start him small, and I'll show you how we can animate scale as well. I mean, why not? Have a little bit of fun. Not something you see every day. I guess that's even weirder than the guy walking in place, but another important thing to understand as well. These cars and a lot of other objects you start to use this move tool with, they will basically go whatever speed you want. The people, though, are set at a specific speed that Lumion has set up. So another thing to avoid and watch out for is having too short of a path. Ignore the scaling in this case. But because we gave him too short of a path, he will flip back and go the other way. You might get lucky and that won't really even show up. It's kind of funny. That won't actually show up in your, might not show up in your rendering, but just to be safe, we would fix that by giving him a longer path. So let's have him start a little further away. These guys are just have a programmed speed to them. Whereas the car, I can make start here and make the car, go the other side of the island. And this will make it happen. Bam, gone. And then our gentleman here is walking, getting bigger. And let's try this again. Bring him back, not so fast. Just so you can kind of get an idea what these other things are if you haven't played with these before. Here we have, that's your pitch, bank. It'll interpolate in between these 2 points and create an animation. It'll be a weird one, but, and then we got scale, and we can make it turn too, and go up in the air. So this will be fun. So lots of options. This is the most simple way of doing things. See, really, to get into Lumion, you just got to have fun and do stuff like this. I'm sure everyone who's jumped into it has done this, and they've, of course, set the building on fire at an airplane crash. I've seen people stuff. That's what everyone does. So this is your time to play around with it and call it R&D. Okay, so let's jump into a couple more advanced options. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these two objects here. Let's start something new. So I'm going to do advanced move. I'm not going to get too in-depth with this. I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. So we have another walking person, and we'll just do another car. Yeah, whatever. We'll just use this van. Alright, so we have our two objects in here. And instead, this time, we're actually going to use advanced move. So advanced move works with a timeline here. So if you remember, we set, this is really important to correlate. We set this to 11 seconds. And when we go into advanced move, it's set at 11 seconds. So that means every moment in here is in that frame. We want to make sure this isn't shorter, because if it's shorter, things will loop back to the beginning once it hits the end here. It's always good to maybe have an extra buffer of a second or so. And when you're finalizing your clips, say you got everything set up and you say, oh, I just want a little bit shorter, and you change the speed, just be careful. That it will adjust, that will affect the advanced move. You'd want to correlate that. Okay, so this is our timeline. This is the exact same thing as this slider here. The only problem is we're not going to be previewing the camera or effects. But what we can do is we can say, right at this point here, we want our person to be right here, and then 2 seconds later, I want him to be over here. Then I want him to go over here. Then I want him to go back over here, and we'll have him walk this way. And then you can play it in here. He's going a little fast. That's something you can be careful for and watch for. But you know, he automatically orients himself, and it just looks like he's really confused. So that worked out. Now we can also, so when you click on him, these keyframes that you've created have just popped in. Important to note that when you when you hover over to the keyframe here, you can remove the keyframe with that garbage can right there. So that's how you remove it. An important thing to understand as well, it's getting a little more advanced than I wanted to talk about, but it is a key detail. Lumion will animate, if you use a couple things, we're going to have them go back and forth. If you use more than, I believe it's 3 keyframes, let's watch what happens here. So here this will test it. Sorry, so we have starting, and I'm going to make him go here, and then I'm going to make him freeze for a couple seconds. And this is important here. This is how to create a keyframe without adjusting the person, because I want him to stay right here in the exact same position here. What you might normally do is just, I'll just move him a little bit, and then it creates a keyframe, but you did move him. He's not in the exact same spot. Sometimes these animations require precision. So this is my trick I've developed to create a keyframe in place. I kind of wish there was just a button for it, but this is how you do it. We're going to use the rotate, because the rotate snaps. So here I am, and it snaps back. That's exactly where he was, and we got our keyframe. So remember that. That's how to create a keyframe in place. And then I want him to go back. And we're going to notice something a little wonky here because I have more than 4 keyframes. Notice how he kind of bounced. He didn't stay in place. He had some inertia stuck in here, and that has to do with the type of animation that happens when you add too many. If I remove this, what he will do is he'll walk and he'll stay. He's kind of rotated, but it's important to know when you try to animate a car. Let's try this with the car. It might be easier to see. Advanced moves mean, yes, you can do some advanced maneuvering with this car. This is going to look really weird. But if you start to add too many, oops, that's on his head. If you start to add too many, it really starts to get a little weird and hard to work with. And it's just however it's coded in Lumion. So you'll see here, the car kind of has some inertia going on. If you want precise point to point, just remember you need to have less. You can only have 3 keyframes. Keep the 3 keyframes. Maybe it's only 2 keyframes. There we go. Oh, I had 3 here, including the last one. So 3 keyframes is the max to keep a very precise point-to-point animation. Once you start adding more, Lumion will kind of add this inertia, ease in, ease out type of curve animation. I know it's kind of advanced. I don't want to get too far into that. Just remember that when you're trying to do some advanced things, this is an awesome tool, but it's kind of limited by that. But we have a really awesome tool I'll show a little later too. So we have the same options as here as well. And that pretty much covers it for advanced move. This is where you can do, I mean, the sky's the limit really for the things you can animate. Just remember the limitations that are here. And luckily, because of some new developments And MassMove, a lot of these things don't even matter because MassMove does an incredible job. So that's advanced move, and you do have a time offset, which be very careful using this because if you change this, this will, change the start point. Here, I'll start at the beginning. You can see that it just adjusts where it is to start with. The problem is when you go to edit it, it's that they're not lined up correctly anymore. You can change it, but when you go to edit again, you have to bring it back to 0. Alright, so advanced move. Now I'll show basics of MassMove. Oops, that's advanced move. MassMove here. Let's go ahead and delete this. Now I've done a pretty in-depth tutorial specifically on MassMove when it first came out, or at least when they brought it out and then they added the curves, which was awesome. And so I did actually one of my first tutorials. It wasn't my first tutorial, was advanced one, my most popular one. So if you want to get to some crazy stuff, I recommend looking at that. We're just going to cover the basics here. In fact, I'm just going to use it with people, not cars in this case. So I'm going to do mass placement here, right below mass placement. I'm going to add a couple people on here. Let's not add the same person multiple times. They're going to be all walking people. I'm using guys. Okay, bunch of people here. Change the number here, offset them, randomize direction. Alright, now take note of this little conveyor belt looking thing because that's exactly how MassMove looks as well. Force on landscape. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this whole crowd at once. You could use the move tool, move each one individually, or you could do the advanced move and move them all individually as well. But what this does is it's like those things, I just think of those things at the airport where you walk on it and it moves you in one direction. So here it is. Sometimes if you want, you gotta add some points, holding control here. You can add some more points and keep it on the ground because this ground is not flat. It should pick it up though. And we're going to open the width here. And this car object speed only works with cars. It's not going to work with people because they have a set speed. So let's just go ahead and recalculate path and hit play. And everyone's moving here and they're going to teleport from here straight to here. Pretty simple, right? You can make it so you can make it so it doesn't read people, only cars, not make it so it doesn't read cars or only imported objects. And then here we have some direction changes. We can have dual direction. So there we have, you could add hundreds of thousands of people if you wanted and just have them all moving here. Works with cars, works with imported objects. We hold control and change specific paths. So what's a trick too is you obviously don't want people teleporting in your scene. So you make them go outside of your camera's boundaries. And that way you'll never see them disappear. They just go off in a distance and they come back off camera. So notice how they're kind of walking in the ground. Some limitations: add more keyframes to get that in there. But that's how you animate a large swath of people. So that covers Lumion's tools for animation. Now I want to cover something like animating a door. So let's see. Okay, so we're gonna jump into another scene. Okay, so we're gonna talk about animating a door. In that case, we're going to jump into, in this case, Sketchup. Here I have a model. A lot of times people ask me how to animate a door open. So when you have your glorious animation in your house, this is just one I found on the warehouse. You can go in the door and have the door open right as you come in. Now I'm going to show you how to do that. First, since we're using Lumion 8.5, let's go ahead and do a live sync. Save. It's fine. I'm going to keep this, so I'm going to start a live sync here. It's not required. But what we're going to do is first we're going to get rid of all these people. And let's find our imported object. Where's the origin? Alright. So here it was buried in the ground. Here's our house. Totally looks like a beach house. It works. Okay. So we're going to animate this door open. So let's first go ahead and kind of create a scene that's going to illustrate that. So here we are. I must have adjusted the color of this water. I'm not sure. It's supposed to be that green. So we're going to come in from the water. Going to go in and we're walking up to the door, and we're going to walk in to this glorious grass and tree infested home. It's kind of like an abandoned home. That's what we're going with here. So here we are. But how are we going to animate that door without animating all of this object? That's what I'll show you guys. Okay. So simply, what we need to do is we need to animate this door, and we need it to animate on the correct pivot point, or so we can rotate it. To help explain that, I'll take a look at this house right now. The pivot point on this house is right here, so we're going to, if I were to rotate it, it pivots around that point. So if this were a door, that wouldn't work really well anyways. So say the idea is we need to split the door model and make it its own model and keep this model with no door. So then when we put the model in, we put the door in place, and then we can animate it independently. That's how it works, and you probably pretty much figured it out already. But if you use the same origin, you're not going to be animating the door correctly. Pretend the house isn't there. Well, actually, watch this. I can show you because it's live synced. I'm going to hide everything but the door. Alright, so we do not want to animate the door like this because I mean, I don't know about your door, but my door does not open that way. We want to put this right at the pivot point. The pivot point in this door is right here. So let's go ahead and return here. Pretend we did not hide the whole house. Alright, so here's our house back. And so what we're going to do here, we're going to stop our live sync. I just thought it was a cool thing to show off right there in real time. Now, I'm going to cut out this door and then save this model. This time I'll save it somewhere. And what I can do here is open a new Sketchup file. I'm trying to be clean. I would normally just delete this one and then paste the door back in, but I'll try to be nice and clean here. So what we're going to do in here, Sketchup jumped open. Give it a second. Alright, we're going to update the model here. Well, that takes a second to do. Oh, I changed my mistake. I'm holding Alt to re-import with the new location, and we're going to reload this house. I changed the file path. Alright, no door. And so in our new blank SketchUp SketchUp project, I'm going to place this door strategically right on this origin. If you haven't noticed, in SketchUp, this origin is right here, the intersection. That's going to be your pivot point right there. In Revit, it works that way too, but it's the origin, the survey point. It's kind of usually really far off. It's kind of harder to work with. I'd probably recommend going through something else like SketchUp or 3ds Max, but that's where it comes from. And we're going to save this as a door. And import a glorious door. That's it. Door. Here it is. Notice that point is right where we want to animate it. So let's kind of place it manually. This could be a little tricky because it's not exactly where it was. Just get as close as we can. I'm not worried about textures or anything. And let's go back into here to our movie, and we're going to go to Advanced Move, because we need to first scroll through this animation, determine when do we want the door to start to open. Fortunately, I'm on frames right now. Go to entire clip again. Okay. Now I have time code. So let's say right here at 8 seconds, we want it to start to swing open, and we want it fully swung open by 9.5 seconds. Alright, so let's go into here. So we said start at 8. Now there are no keyframes at all right here. So first, we need to set our first keyframe, in this case, keeping the door closed. Remember, the rotate creates an awesome snap. We got our keyframe, and then we're going to go to 9.5. And then I am blinking. Front doors go swinging in or out. I apologize, guys. Architects out there, you can shoot me. This is I'm gonna have the door swing open for effect. And obviously I would have probably modeled a space in there, but you get the idea. Nice clean animation. We could even make it close later too. Open, and then it'll close slowly after, even though our camera won't see it. Alright, so when we play, there it is. Oh, let's you know what, just for now, we'll just make it stay open. I've done it before. Here we go. Rushing into our house. The abandoned house with grass and trees inside of it, but the door opens by itself. That's not sketchy at all. I'd walk into that. There we go. So that's animating a door. Try to keep this brief, and this is going a little longer. So I can show off something. I don't even think I need to show it off. I do have another tutorial, another channel that covers this, but I was going to cover like animating something like a crane, where the top part of the crane rotates but the base stays in place. Using this door tutorial, you should kind of get an idea of how to do that. What you would do is you'd have your SketchUp model, and you would save the base as its own model. It doesn't really matter where its grab point is. Might be good to be in the center. And then save the top part as a new object. And remember to understand the pivot point at this intersection. We would want it to be able to be centered in here, so when we rotate it, it rotates around this. Like pretend this is a crane. I think you get the idea. That way we have two independent objects, and then you can add tons of other options and abilities as well by separating. I wouldn't recommend trying to do too complex of things. One time I tried to actually do a full crane movement and everything. It's a little more complicated for this. But I've covered the real basics of animating in Lumion. This is kind of an intermediate tool, being able to animate separate pieces and pivot points. And when it comes down to it, whatever you want to animate, I have a 40 animation series as tutorial as well, which goes off of this idea that anything you want to be able to animate independently, you just have to break apart from your main model and import it separately so we get a new pivot point to grab. Until Lumion can read individual nodes from inside one object, which hopefully that comes sometime, We have to have them as separate, completely separate objects to animate them. And now I'll just talk very briefly about importing animations. And I have another tutorial releasing that's covering this really in depth for 3ds Max. But the way this kind of works is when you go to import a new object, I'm just going to do this door again. We'll call it door 2. Notice that there's an import animations toggle button here. So what that means is we can import only very basic animations from softwares like 3ds Max, Maya, Blender. I happen to know my other tutorial covers those 3ds Max, and that's the only one I've actually tried. But in these softwares, you can animate doing the same things as advanced move, scale, move, height, rotation. Only those real basic things will come in. And so if you have an imported car, the wheels aren't going to move, and even if you set advanced move on it, or move, or mass move, the wheels will just remain frozen. So that's an opportunity for you to go into another modeling software. In my case, I use 3ds Max, and animate those wheels to rotate in a perfectly circular order, and then import it in here. Click the import animations toggle, and they'll come in animated. They'll just always be moving. That's kind of the idea. And there's kind of another sample that might help here too. It works a lot like these birds. So check out this bird. If you notice, you put these birds down and you can never find them again. It's because these are basically probably animated the same way, just in Lumion's library. So there's that green outline of the bird. Oh, there he goes through it. He's animated, and he's set on a loop. So essentially what we can do is we can create objects that on a loop like that as well, and bring them in. Again, I'll refer to my other tutorial. I cover that more in depth. And one other thing to kind of show off in that case, especially with these birds, because these work just like custom imported animations, we get a little tool here called the time warp. So there's animated people, animals, and also a separate one for imported models. Sometimes you can actually model a really accurate movement of a car where it even bounces with suspension and everything. I've seen it happen. And it'll always start at 0 in your clip here, and maybe it just barely misses, does something weird at the end, or loops back. You have a slider here to offset it. We can see on the birds here, we're offsetting the starting point of these birds. Now, sorry I'm not showing that exactly. Again, there'll be a link in the description to my other in-depth one, and also my more advanced and clear door and crane animation. But I just want to kind of real briefly cover animations in general, and I probably got a little carried away as it is. I hope you guys are able to kind of learn and get a little bit more comfortable with animating objects in Lumion. To go over things again, the real basics are using this move effect and kind of advanced move. It's kind of a basic intermediate where we can control every point on the timeline here, but also watch out for adding too many keyframes because it gets a little weird. And then we have MassMove for real quick movement, and you can do one object in MassMove as well, or multiple. And then we covered animating the door by separating the models and animating them individually. And then we can go into 3ds Max and export animations from there and import them into Lumion. Just remember also they're limited to move, scale, rotate, the basics. If the geometry stretches, it won't come in. It's called vertex animation. Lumion's very limited. You can't import people like your typical rigging. If you guys know what I'm talking about, that unfortunately does not come in. All the people who are animating here are done through Lumion in-house, and it's a pretty complex process. But there's a lot of power I've seen in people doing animations in 3ds Max, so check out my other tutorial, and I hope you guys have a good, solid idea of different options in animating in Lumion. Alright, thanks for watching, and until next time guys, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave any comments, other tutorials you'd like to see. I'm going to start getting these out more often and covering a broader range of subjects, from the basics to advanced. Alright, until next time.